We are creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective, moments in time captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
Hey guys, it's Darrian Douglas. Welcome to the second season of the Working Artist Project. In fact, if you're back after the first season, welcome home. And if you're not, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast. I sit down with some of the most influential and talented artists from multiple fields, and we discuss the challenges of constructing a successful career as an artist. You will be inspired and motivated after listening to these amazing people conquer challenges and live life on their terms. Welcome to the Working Artist Project. Today I want to welcome Jason Marshall to the Working Artist Project.
Hello.
Yeah, man, you got to get a little closer.
Do I? Okay.
Yeah, that's good. So, man, I want to start just with you telling me where you're from and how you got started and why you chose the baritone saxophone.
I was born in Washington, D.C., raised in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay.
I got started playing music because there was always music in the house. There was always a piano. My mother sang. My folks, put on a lot of events through an organization that they ran called the National Black Media Coalition, which is a media advocacy group.
Oh, cool.
So I experienced art and entertainment that way. I mean, I met the Nicholas Brothers.
I don't even know who that is.
The Nicholas Brothers?
Yeah.
Two of the greatest dancers that ever did live.
Okay.
I met Louis Gossett Jr., Quincy Jones, Eartha Kitt, Tommy Davidson before he was known.
Wow.
So many people. So many people. So to an extent, art was always, black art was always around.
Mm-hmm.
And there was never a separation between that and daily life.
And your parents, they were musicians, or they
My
were artists?
my mother sings beautifully even now, but they were not strictly speaking musicians in that way. Although my mother was, when she was younger, she did sing in groups and so forth.
Okay.
But that was not their profession in my lifetime was never music in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So during the end of third grade, the school system where I went to school and matriculated, Montgomery County school systems, there was always a musical presentation at the end of third grade, and you'd see people play instruments and explain what was different about instruments. And then during that summer, you then had an option to decide to play an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked the saxophone. Before that, though, my brother and sister and we all took piano lessons. So you were going to experience instrumental music at some point in life growing up in my household.
Okay.
But at the end of third grade, I picked saxophone and alto.
Oh, so you started on alto.
Alto was what was available unless you were exceptionally large for fourth grade, and then you had tenor. But
right.
I didn't know from alto and tenor. I just knew saxophone.
Mm.
And so they took me to Washington Music Center in Silver Spring, and they rented me a saxophone.
Oh.
And that's what happened. And then the end of the fourth grade year, I presented a particular aptitude for it, and so they bought it, and I went to a music camp the summer between fourth and fifth grade, and I was able to get a few things together, to the extent a fifth grader can.
Okay.
And during that camp, there was a guy named Montrell Smith, and he played baritone, and he was like the star of the camp, so. It's funny because he reached out to me recently. We touch base every few years, But he reached out and said, hey, and I don't know if he still plays, but that's where I first saw a baritone being played in person, was at that camp. And then the next year, I played alto still, but I, just that the baritone was something that I still had to kind of figure out. And so in sixth grade, I had access to it. I actually got into a fight in 6th grade band.
Okay.
And I was kept in for recess because of that fight. And during that time where I was not allowed to go out, there was a baritone in the instrument room.
Mm-hmm.
And because the infraction was in music class, the detention, so to speak, was in music class too. And so I started rummaging through the instrument closet and found a baritone, and that's how I got started.
Okay, so you're in detention, supposed to be chilling, you looking through instruments.
Well, that was probably the safest thing for me to do at the time.
Right.
But yeah, my teacher at the time was a woman named Holly Pasquale, and to look back, I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity, because she was always interested in her students truly knowing music. And I even remember when she said, Jason, you don't know how to read music. And I was supposed to have known it by then.
Right.
But I didn't. And so she made sure that I got that together in middle school.
Was she like giving you guys after class or something like that?
She had, in hindsight, I realized she had a gift for recognizing aptitude for music.
Okay.
So whereas other students, she might not have been so forthright about learning how to read and how to play and perform, stand up in front of people. She was intent that I get those things together. Mm-hmm. So I realize now that she saw something that needed a push, and she pushed, and here we are.
Okay, cool, man. So that was 6th grade.
That was 6th grade.
You chose baritone,
Mm-hmm.
and so you started just playing. Did you take it home, or what was the vibe on that?
I took it home. Yeah, over the summer I took it home, and practiced it to the extent possible, and played along with records. And my folks had a fabulous music collection, so it was. I mean, even now, the first time I heard baritone in the setting that really appealed to me, it was George Benson Cookbook. Ronnie Cuber and Lonnie Smith and Jimmy Lovelace on drums. Some of that was Charlie Persip on drums.
Yeah.
But yeah, my parents already had that stuff, and they already had all of the hits, all Earl Klugh and just Earth, Wind and Fire and
the whole thing.
Everybody.
Yeah, man. So later you got to play with Roy Hargrove.
You skipping all the way.
He's just all the way.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's New York time. That's college, right?
Yeah. When I met Roy, I was in undergrad at the new school. I met him at a jam session.
Okay.
Because you could still meet people at jam sessions at that time. And I saw then that he was responsive to my persistence. I was always out playing.
Okay.
I would never just hang. I'd never show up without my horn. I'd never show up and not play. So one thing that I recognize about then that I see is perhaps different now is that there is a noticeable lack of persistence. Folks only show up when they get to make up all the rules and call all the tunes. And yeah, when I showed up, everyone I knew showed up, and we would make the best out of whatever was there.
Right.
So whatever the tunes were, whatever the rhythm section was, we would play and make the most out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met Roy either at Cleopatra's Needle, which is still there in some form or fashion, or I met Roy at a place called Niagara, which at that time was on East 7th and Avenue A. I don't know if it's still there. If it's still there, I don't believe they have live music in there anymore.
Right. Yeah, I never heard of that place.
But those were the places. And there was Up Over, but that was in Brooklyn. So if you didn't go to Brooklyn a lot, then perhaps you wouldn't have experienced Up Over. There was a guy named Bob who ran it. They called him Up Over Bob.
Okay.
And that's where I met Marcus and EJ. That's where I met Jaleel Shaw.
Cats.
That's where I met Walter Smith. That's where I met that group of folks. Up Over was kind of their scene. Laurent Thomas, that's everyone who was like up and coming at the time I got to town, which is 2003.
Okay.
That was what was going on at the time.
So your first gig with Roy, like, were you prepared? Were you unprepared?
No.
What happened?
The first, yeah, the first gig I was not prepared for. I didn't expect it to happen. I saw Roy enough at jam sessions, and we played enough together and had enough conversations where he eventually started saying, "Oh, we're gonna play one day, man. We're gonna play." He kept saying that. And he said, "Give me your number." And he'd always say it, and after a while he'd say, "Okay, he keeps saying
Easy, right?"
and he said it enough times, and then one day he called me on the phone, and that was in the year 2004.
Okay.
Roy has not called me on the telephone since then. I ended up working with him for a long time, but that was the first and perhaps only time he himself called me on the phone.
Wow.
He said, "Hey man, I got this gig at the Hollywood Bowl, and I want to know if you can make it." He called, left a message because I didn't hit the phone.
That's the jazz festival?
Yeah, it was
in LA,
the
right?
Playboy Jazz Festival,
Yeah.
the Hollywood Bowl, and he said, "Yeah, I got this band. We got a new record out, and I don't know if you can make it to gigs this weekend." He called me like Thursday. The gig was Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and can you make it? The answer obviously is yes. He said, "Okay, my manager will call you, get the record, learn the music." I said yes, hung up the phone, and I didn't realize, I didn't know what record he was talking about. Because at that time, the only thing that I listened to was baritone saxophone players.
Oh,
that I didn't, I was aware of more or less what everything else was going on, but
right.
I didn't. All I listened to was baritone saxophone and rhythm section. That was it. And so he said he had a record out, and at the time I lived in a place with 4 other roommates.
Okay.
And one of them had the record.
So it's 5 of y'all in there.
There's 5 of us in there.
Damn.
And it was a typical New York apartment where you open the door, it's just a long hallway with one room at the end, right, and a bunch of rooms along the way.
Right.
And my roommate at the time had the record. I borrowed the record, transcribed the whole record on the airplane on the way there. One of the skills that I acquired fairly early was transcription.
Okay.
That has served me very well through the years. So I got the record, and I didn't even know what on the record he wanted me to know. So I just transcribed everything.
Damn. A 5-hour plane ride.
Yeah. I mean, I got a little bit of a head start listening to it, in a day or so. I had my hands on it before I had to get on the plane. But my mother sang to me, so my ears were always strong.
Right.
My ears were always strong. I'm deaf in one ear now, which is totally unrelated to music, and I wear a hearing aid. But the muscle memory, so to speak, is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So I could listen to something a few times, and without the aid of an instrument, write it down. And so that's what I did with that record. I wrote it down.
Damn.
And this, again, this is one of those skills you don't wear on your sleeve. You have it in there when you need it. You deal with it.
Right.
So I transcribed the record, and I got there. I got to California, and met everyone in the airport. And I remember I got to the airport, and Reggie Washington, the bass player, had his hat pulled down over his eyes. He was asleep sitting on the chair. And they're like, "Yeah, that's the bass player." And I'm like, "Okay." Then Renee Newville, and at the time it was Keith Anderson playing saxophone, and Jason Thomas on drums, and also Willie Jones. He carried 2 drummers at the time.
Okay.
And Todd Parsons on guitar, and Roy. And that was the band, and that was the beginning of all the big stuff. That was the first time I had met anyone other than Roy. Maybe I had met. Maybe I didn't meet Wynton by then, but just so the brand names that we all
Right, of
kind
course.
of are
Right.
familiar with. That was the beginning of my being on the road and meeting folks in that capacity. The way you meet people on tour at a festival, and you see,
Of course.
that was the beginning of that. And so I got to meet. I say meet. I got to see Herbie Hancock. Wayne Shorter. At the time there was a band with Herbie and Wayne and Dave Holland and Brian Blade.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And that was an interesting experience because that was the first time where I realized you could watch. You could see something impressive take place without enjoying it, because I didn't realize that I was watching something that was, for all intents and purposes, over my head.
Right.
But after the initial shock of seeing it take place, I was okay admitting that I didn't particularly care for it musically because I just didn't understand it.
Right.
And I remember standing there just kind of in awe of, man, it's Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter and everybody. Right. And Roy was standing next to me. This is after the gig. And he's like, man, you hungry? You having an In-N-Out burger? You know what I'm saying? So he was as interested as I was in what was happening. So that was the beginning of understanding that I could feel okay having a quite independent musical taste.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that gig was the beginning of the spinning stage at Hollywood Bowl and the notion of having to memorize things that you don't know. Right. And having to perform and having to play in front of 10,000 people. But yeah, and I remember Keith Anderson and Roy having push-up competitions.
Oh.
Because one of the things that I learned along the way is that everyone, whether they had the discipline to stick to it or not, understood that physical fitness was part of musical excellence.
Right.
Everyone understood that. Not all of them had it together to really stay that course, but they all knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because that was one of the first things Herlin told me when I met him. You know what I mean? He was like, if you're going to be a drummer, you got to be strong.
You got to be strong. You got to be strong.
So, man, what in particular did you learn from being with Roy that you think would be valuable for other young musicians coming up?
I learned that discipline is not automatic. Mm-hmm. And that discipline is a pursuit. It's something that you develop and you have to maintain over time. It will not just be there.
You mean discipline on your instrument, or what?
However you receive it, discipline. You can have a musical gift or talent, but without discipline, it's usually wasted at some point.
You've witnessed him. His.
Well, what I'm saying is that I have witnessed, through my experience with him, the right and the wrong way to do just about everything.
Okay.
And he was always very, very, very plain emotionally, which is to say, he was not but completely open, on an emotional level. So that very often manifested in some occasionally unfortunate ways. Mm-hmm. But he was and I believe is fully committed to the music. It's just that the discipline that it takes to do this long term and be better for that commitment was, as with a lot of folks, occasionally lost on him. You cannot love music so much that you don't have to take care of anything else.
Oh, right.
That is not unique to Roy. I found that with most of the folks I worked with.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about me that, put me in those situations. But I was and am blessed to have learned from people like that all along the way, who were happy to teach me, but also could not help but show me the right and wrong way to do things.
I hear you.
Roy's music blossomed completely, in my estimation, So it was a blessing to have been around at that time to watch it happen. I mean, now I understand the expressions on the faces of people who got to play with Freddie Hubbard in a certain time. Now I understand why they would talk to me about Freddie in the way they did. Because now when people talk to me about Roy, I find myself making some of the same faces as people who talked about Freddie. Mm-hmm. I am not in a position to tell you how Roy will proceed or how he's doing. I know I'm playing with him coming up. I haven't seen him in years, but I know I'm happy to be a part of whatever's down the road, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the thing about Roy is that he was always committed to the music, and that's rare now. Yeah. People are even really good musicians are completely distracted by all these other things going on, and Roy was always about music.
Man, I want to ask you about the current, the most recent police shootings, and how they affect you, and how they affect the music and the people around you.
That's what they were put there to do. So now we're equipped such that we can film them doing that, but that's what they were sent there to do. So it's unfortunate that they were sent there for those purposes, but that's what they were sent to do. It's not good, but again, that is expressly what they were put there to do. Police exist to act as the military wing and or I should say the defense arm of a particular demographic, and they're there to do that. Mm-hmm. So it's you know, as they say, it's not them, but those who sent them. They're there doing what they trained and paid to do.
Yeah. And so how does that whole thing affect the music, at least the music that you're creating?
In the interest of homeostasis, while I do have a responsibility to register what's happening, I don't register quite the obligation to allow it to affect my production in a particularly obvious way. There are times when, yes, there is an obvious reaction to an obvious transgression, but I don't feel that I have to react in such a common way as I see so many artists doing. And very often I find artists can only react as their skill set will allow.
Right.
So that's why growing that skill set is important to me, because it allows you options artistically in terms of how you react. We cannot help but be directly affected by what's going on now, but the reality is it's always gone on. Only difference is our ability to document it.
Right.
That's it. And our awareness of how unaffected so many people are by what's been documented. And again, that's not new. None of what is happening now is new. All that's new is phones with cameras and social media.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
It's the only thing that's new. What has come to light is that nothing has changed.
Exactly.
That perhaps is different. That is what is that is what is perhaps the new thing to contend with. That nothing is different. So as we look at, Eyes on the Prize, and as we look at all these different civil rights documentaries, and we watch movies like Rosewood, and things are exactly as they have been.
Yeah, that's the scariest part about America. America has remained stagnant in this very particular area. And, it seems to be no end in that sight.
Again, America, if I'm understanding what you mean by that, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. So the notion of progress is, I think, one of the new things that people have to figure out how to divest. It's not designed to progress. It's designed to stay in this holding pattern where one group of people are fine. This is part of why it's hard to get other folks to recognize a problem, because it's not a problem for everyone. Mm. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's a problem now that the folks who experience the problem can show you, hey, we have a problem. But the problems are not new. And they happen with such regularity, it's easy to see now that they've been engineered to do just what they're doing. So I found peace in the reality that this is a moment in time, in our, I say our, I mean humanity is roughly 200,000 years. This is a blip. This is a less than 1,000-year hiccup in the natural order of things.
Right.
So, yes, it's unfortunate. It's painfully unfortunate, but it has happened, and it is happening on purpose. And that's why I don't speak about police brutality and militarization of police. All those terms presuppose that they weren't sent here to do this anyway,
right? And
they were. So that's why this notion of there's got to be justice, and how can you see this and there's no conviction? You can't convict people for doing their job.
Damn,
it's their job. I mean, you can't. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And so yes, it is from my perspective inhumane, but inhumane treatment is necessarily part of the program.
Mm-hmm. Let me switch gears.
Okay.
Back to this music thing, and just thinking about. I think the most daunting thing about moving to New York, at least for me, and I'm sure for people who don't live here who want to move here to be an artist, is trying to figure out how to make a living. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you've seemed to figure that out. And how did you do that? And what advice would you have for someone who wants to follow in your footsteps?
First of all, if you need for it to happen in a certain time span, you shouldn't do it. First of all, if you're the type of person that says, okay, I'm going to show up and I'm going to give New York 4 years, then don't come.
Got you.
Don't, because it just doesn't work like that. Even if it works exactly as you plan it in those 4 years, there's the day after those 4 years, which can go drastically different than the first 4 years.
Right.
And New York has a way of making it so no amount of money will get you excited. New York has a way of making you live just beyond any amount of means.
Right.
If your next gig pays $3 million, in a year you're going to be trying to figure out what to do for money.
Right.
That's real. Okay? That's real. I don't care how nice the gig is. I don't care what... that's why people who do nice gigs still work.
Yeah.
Because New York has a way of conditioning you to expand your living to just beyond what your means are. But if you're so busy living the life, you'll never know that. Then you look up and you don't have anything, you can't do anything, and you're stuck. And so you got to leave or you got to die. Most people. I'm saying.
Okay.
I've seen it. I'm telling you what I've seen. I know a lot of people who just say, well, I can't continue my lifestyle here in New York, so I got to leave New York so I can continue my lifestyle. And I understand that. New York requires way more discipline than anyone wants to admit to be here for the, long term.
Right.
Most people get caught up in what they think, based on, they watch Mo Better Blues, or they
Right,
think
right.
that's the life. And
Well, I was a victim of that.
okay,
You coming from Mississippi,
but again, if you're from Mississippi, or if you're from Portland, or if you're from
Right.
wherever you're from,
right?
that's what you see. You think that's how it goes.
Yeah,
And then you get here and you realize it's a whole other thing.
right.
But I found that if I could live with a degree of discipline that allowed for a degree of wellness, and this is not to say living high, but I always tried to take care of myself. I didn't find any rhythm with that until the last maybe 5 years. But I wanted to live well. I didn't always know what that meant, but I wanted to live well.
Right.
So everything would always come back to, that and just being able to be well. I see a lot of folks doing a lot of nice gigs. They were always sick, always drunk, always hungover, always ODing, always homeless, always, owing people money, always hungry, always, somehow beset by a condition. And so, again, I was fortunate that I got to work with folks who showed me exactly how and how not to live. I've seen so much that sometimes it's even startling to remember how much I've seen, because I was the fly on the wall for a whole lot of stuff.
Right.
I was the fly on the wall. I was the fly on the wall when I saw Benny Golson and Johnny Griffin looking at each other when they looked at another famous saxophone player, like, yeah, he don't get it.
Yeah.
I was there for that.
Right.
But that's because I wasn't at the bar. You understand what I'm saying? That's because I wasn't outside smoking a cigarette with someone else who I wanted to be friends with, who was famous at the time.
Right.
You see, Benny Golson and Johnny Griffin were inside playing saxophone, so I was going to be right there.